Hey, good afternoon. Justin, as Karen said, Justin Enslin, Queensland Parks and Wildlife, the Principal Ranger for the Sunshine Coast area. I'd firstly like to acknowledge the Jinibara people whose country I'm on today. Thank you, Auntie Zita, for a lovely welcome to country. I also want to acknowledge the Cubby people, because what I'll be talking about a little bit later on is the Glasshouse Mountains, and as we know, part of the Glasshouse Mountains is Cubby, and part of it is Jinibara. So, thank you. Carrying on from there, Karen and Spencer, thanks very much for the invite. And I just want to say that one advantage that we have is that we're still in the embryonic stages of phytophthora within our area. We've got the advantage of Western Australia and Southern Australia, who have done a lot of work in this space, and we can learn a lot from them, as well as from META and from New Zealand. So that's a good spot. Before I start, I'd also just like to acknowledge my colleagues over there. We've got Jesse Rowland, who's the Senior Conservation Officer for our region. He's done a lot of work in this space. Donna Haslam, the Senior Ranger for Maleny, who looks after the Glasshouse Mountains National Park along with her team, and Lauren Hughes, who's a Management Unit Support Ranger for the Maleny Work Unit. So thank you. I'm no expert in phytophthora at all. All I'm here today is to explain what we, as an operational team here on the Sunshine Coast, have been doing in this space since we first discovered phytophthora in the Glasshouse Mountains National Park. Okay, so we can go on to slide 2. Thank you. So in February 24, the QPWS health check program identified dieback in our Montane Heath community, affecting some of the species there, the Banksia, Eucalypt and Xanthorrhoeus species on the summit of Mount Tibrogargan in the Glasshouse Mountains National Park. So the health check program forms part of the values-based management framework, which is a internationally recognized best practice for the management of protected areas. And what it does is it outlines what our key values are, and it also part of the key values and seeing what condition they are in is a visual tool that's carried out, which is called the health check itself. So staff will go out once a year or twice a year, I think it is, and they will sit in a predetermined area every year, look at what's around them, and do a whole lot of checks and balances on the ecosystem around them. So what happened as part of this health check, staff identified, just as you're looking at there, that's the picture on top of Tibrogargan, a Xanthorrhoeus species that was looking awfully sick, and that was the start of further investigation. Soil samples were taken, and it was confirmed that we now have Phytophthora cinnamoni in the Glasshouse Mountains National Park. That was a surprise to us, but we historically, other Phytophthora locations have been identified in those 4 parks there, Lamington, Springbok down south. And obviously in southwest region, in the Bunya Mountains. So the different regions within parks, we're in the southeast Queensland region, and then Bunya's is in the southwest region.
Can I just ask a question? Have you found dieback like at Point Arkwright or anywhere along the actual coast?
No, not as I'm aware. We are working closely with council, so whatever you find, and we're sharing with council. So I'm sure outside of our protected areas, council will be doing more work in that space. Yeah. So what's at risk? Well, that's fairly obvious, but the Glasshouse Mountains hold significant environmental and cultural values and forms part of the First Nations cultural law and stories. As I said earlier, we've got both native title holders in the room, and it's very important that the cultural side of the management of our parks carries on, so to speak, or improves. The risk of Phytophthora being spread to other peaks and surrounding areas of the Sunshine Coast. We've seen the potential impacts of what Phytophthora can do in the greater landscapes like Western Australia, and I've seen some stuff in South Australia as well. Changing habitat structure and condition of montane heath communities and other communities, plant communities. Potential to infect nearby threatened flora species, populations, and just named a couple of our threatened plant species there. As we know, the Glasshouse Mountains, and since COVID, we've just seen an absolute explosion of visitors across the Sunshine Coast, not only in Glasshouse Mountains, but everywhere. And we, at the moment, probably get in excess of 250,000 visitors to the Glasshouse Mountains Park annually. That's increasing. We're finding that more and more people are wanting to go off track and not stick to the tracks. They want to get that Instagram shot or go and make their own way to the edge of something. So that's creating more tracks, which creates more problems. We also have what they're calling, how many peaks can you do in one day? And so people will come to the Glasshouse Mountains, they'll climb Beerwell, they'll climb Mount Invergargan, they'll do Tibbawookum, they'll go to Coochen Hills. So it's a big risk for us of transferring Phytophthora from one area to another. What our response has been so far, we've reviewed and mapped known locations of Phytophthora across southeast Queensland. Our area, protected area state for broader context, and that's just a map, as I said earlier, they're down southern end, Springbrook, Mount Barney, Lamington and Muggera Peaks, and then up right at the top is us, the Glasshouse Mountains National Park. We've done a lot of asking questions, so to speak, of different departments. Professor King Pegg from DPI, retired professor, and Dr. Jeff Pegg. And there's a lot of work being done outside of Dead Sea and other government departments on Phytophthora. Pneumonia, I believe, was first identified on the Sunshine Coast in the 60s and 70s. And there was a significant amount of research done in the 70s in Kalula National Park and in Bribie Island Area National Park on Phytophthora. We know that Phytophthora is common in the agricultural landscape. It affects, pineapples, avocados, as well as palm plantations. And as we've seen earlier, it's not going away, so we're going to have to manage it. Thank you. Going back from the last slide, but some of the thought process of why all of a sudden we've had these outbreaks in the Glasshouse Mountains is that they believe that one of the reasons is the same sort of weather conditions in the 60s and 70s as has happened in the last 5 years or so here in the Sunny Coast area. Well, that's the thoughts anyway. As I said earlier, we've been able to consult and review interstate policies and protocols. So it's been really handy for us to say, well, what are we going to do? How are we going to respond? And there's a lot of literature, policy and research already done. So you'll see as I go through the presentation, a lot of the stuff you've just seen from Western Australia, from Dr. Ireland, we slowly implementing here locally. What we're doing now is we've identified our key values in the Glasshouse Mountains. We know our interim key values and the threats, focused on them. and what we're doing is we've put in some temporary closures and hygiene measures. We've also used to look at the most use in parks. You all know about Strava maps, heat maps, and that's a good way. It was a good way for us to look at our area and say, hey, well, that's our normal walking track there, but what's all of this, what's all of that, what's all of that? So when we want to monitor further for Phytophthora, we know where to go. So on slide 5, which is, yes, that's the one. So that's, so we've implemented a hygiene protocol on our park, and basically it's arrive clean and leave clean. There's personal cleaning for our rangers on park and vehicle cleaning. This goes to contractors as well. We've piggybacked off some of the stuff that's Western Australia's already developed in that space. So there's a good hygiene protocol, and it's all about. We've got kits for each vehicle, bigger kits to clean down the vehicles. Obviously, some of our vehicles are fire vehicles that carry water, so we can use our fire units to wash down vehicles if required, coming or going into an area. We've also got little personal hygiene kits for the rangers should they leave the vehicle and have to travel in by foot, that if they're in a known Phytophthora area or if they are in a known area where there's threatened and endangered species, they can make sure their boots are clean before entering that area. It's all about minimising access to wet areas and wet conditions. So as previously mentioned, we'll try and, as best it's much harder here in Queensland, but if we don't need to travel down a track, a fire break or a walking track in the wet, then we'll wait until dry times. Get slide 6. What we've done to date, as I said earlier, we have in the endangered Grevillea hodgkia in the Cuchin Hills section of Glasshouse Mountains Park, and straight away when we found out that we had Phytophthora in the Glasshouse Mountains Park, we focused on obviously the endangered and threatened species, and so we put an immediate temporary closure in on the eastern side of Cuchin Hills, so we didn't close off the whole section. Now Cuchin Hills hasn't got any informal walking tracks, it's utilised informally, but there are walking tracks in there. So we closed the eastern side. We've also then looked into, we need boot cleaning stations. So we started doing research, and Southwest was good with this. The Bunya team, they've got foot cleaning stations there ready. We looked at what they got. They're using a New Zealand product, and we also looked at Western Australia at boot cleaning stations. What happened was both to get them made and to get them shipped over had long lead times. So we decided we've got to do something in the interim, so we made up our own temporary boot cleaning stations, and these are without the chemical that will spray onto your shoes, like I'll explain a bit later, but they were just purely a place for people to get most of the mud off their shoes. And you can see in the far right there, that one that's been made up just with the brushes. The first night they were in, the whole grid and the brushes disappeared, so we had to come back and put locks on them. So funny. There's also there's a strategic placement of these boot cleaning stations. We've got 2 at the entrance to Tibrogargan at the moment, and you can see that one in the centre there, which is at Cuchin Hills. We've also at the entrance to Cuchin Hills, it was quite muddy. We had a lot of water runoff. So one of the considerations in the management of Phytophthora is hardening surfaces, and as you saw, getting rid of those muddy areas, and also obviously developing signage to go with those boot cleaning stations. Next slide, please. This is all about media, our media campaign. This is what is the most important, is the education longer term. Eventually we want to get to, and it's going to be challenging, as Dr. Ireland said, this continual, because people forget about things, so we're going to have to continue to remind people, but we want to get to a point where that most people know that you're not allowed to take a dog into a national park, and we want people to know that you need to clean your boots before coming in and leaving national parks. QPS media team has developed some great content using Facebook, Instagram, our mainstream media, our website, with lots of information on Phytophthora. We also had Minister Powell visit Tibrogargan on Channel 7 and give a speech on how important it is that we acknowledge that we've got Phytophthora and what we're doing about it. We've also had some independent Facebook groups like Take a Hike jump on board, and through their own media and that show the good message, so to speak. Overall, a good reaction and feedback on social media with many that support temporary closures and the measures taken. Slide 8. This was my special slide, but it's been taken away by Western Australia. I thought we were the first. But if you go on to that on the right, there should be. There we go. You can see the dog, the detection dog in work. Yeah, so it's been found to be a very effective way of detecting Phytophthora. Jesse Rowland, through a networking group down south, got introduced through DAF, through two tame animals, these people that use dogs, and they've been used, these specific dogs have been used in New South Wales in New South Wales National Parks and on Lord Howe Island to detect Phytophthora, but this is the first time they've come into Queensland and to do Phytophthora work. Surveys were prioritised based on proximity and to the known Phytophthora outbreak, and using Strava maps and seeing where there's potential risk areas, and as we expected, results found that Phytophthora is indicated in a range of locations throughout the Glasshouse Mountains National Park, including at Cuchin Hills. So, I believe also, just out of interest, these dogs are also being used for fire ant detection, a good thing. Yes, sorry.
I've just got a quick question. So with the dieback that's happening in the Glasshouse Mountains that's not on with bunyas,
yes,
is there any, and I know that we've got cool burning, the rangers are doing cool, has any of these Dioptera infested areas been cool burned? And have you got any comment on if it's been...
Sure, it relates to that question the gentleman asked earlier. So,
yeah, it's an important
with fire management comes into it, into Phytophthora management. There's no doubt, because if what I see is we need good burn practices, because what happens if we have bad burn practices and we have hot fires, we put vegetation under stress. And once vegetation is under stress, it's more susceptible to Phytophthora. So the cooler burning practices and regimes is definitely a thing to look at. So we've identified that, and it's something we've got to put a lot more work into. What worries us is the wildfire season, because we have no control on that. So when we have hot fires coming through, we'll probably up our monitoring in that area to look for Phytophthora because of the susceptible, immune systems.
Can you mitigate that with cool burning? Is that something that you're talking about or getting consultancy on?
Absolutely. Cool burnings. We've a lot of our staff have done fire sticks. We're working with both the Ginniburra and the Kabi Land and Sea Ranger program to integrate that into our burnings. Absolutely.
Great.
Yeah. And with monitoring as well, both the Kabi Land and Sea and the Ginniburra Land and Freshwater Ranges are sure to be involved in the monitoring and management of Phytophthora.
When are you likely to begin the cool burning mitigation process to begin collecting data on how cool burning can affect Dioptera?
Yeah, so cool burning cool burning. We normally start our burning program now as summer ends off.
So you're talking about a cool burning program?
Well, generally parks try, and I know I'm not talking about fire sticks or Aboriginal cool burning practices. I'm just talking about our burning practices. We also strive to burn in cooler months, cool burns. It might not be the same, but it's on the same.
The reason I mention this because you've been talking about hygiene
Yes.
for all of these areas, and from my experience with cool burning, the cool burning immediately will connect into the hygiene component if you get some consultancy on how cool burning actually works and can work. I'm not an expert in it. I am a little tiny bit of an expert, though you could get someone like Victor or to really understand.
Time, if we could just let Justin finish his presentation.
Yeah.
And then we can have a...
Happy to have a chat to you over lunch.
Okay.
Yep. No worries. So we're moving on to next steps. Slide number 9. So significant flora species listed have been mapped and overlaid with positive Phytophthora sites. So that's one of the things we said, well, how are we going to do this? Where's our risk? So we've got our Phytophthora sites and we've got our vegetation, we've got our at-risk vegetation, and that's all been mapped. These are the boot cleaning stations, the proper ones that have been ordered and are being made in Western Australia. I believe they will be shipped out in the next week or two. To Maleny. The initial order is 12, and they're going to be placed at strategic locations across the Glasshouse Mountains National Park. Park and track manager discussions ongoing, with some ideas being considered, such as temporary closures during wet weather, hardening of tracks to remove areas where water accumulates, diversion of tracks away from sensitive areas and species of concerns. But the most important one is continued education to the public via signage, social media and websites. And we're going to up our monitoring on other vectors such as pigs that also play a role in moving Phytophthora around the landscape. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Are there others in the audience who has a question for Justin that we could have before lunch?
Yep.
So I've been to the Bunya Mountains, I've seen their boot washing stations, and sometimes they're in a bit of disrepair. And I understand it's a funding thing, ranges can't be everywhere, so I can see that happening here. Is there consideration to get community land care groups and stuff involved as well to help monitor those things, and help educate and not just use social media?
Absolutely. As I said, we're still in the embryonic stages, within the Glasshouse Mountains, so we're open to anything, and this group has been fantastic. I mean, we've learnt a lot just ourselves now from what we've seen, and and we can see the passion in the room, and happy to involve all groups.
Thank you. Yeah.
And that embryonic stage that you said that you're in is part of the reason why I'm mentioning the cool burning, so we get those conversations in the embryonic stage.
Sure. No, thank you.
I'll just follow on the boot washing story.
So at American Crossroads, for a different reason, I know that they have a good washing station, but it seems very optional, and I'm sure you've thought about all of that, is how you actually just make it. This is critical that you do wash before you enter there.
It's something still a work in progress. So what we did with and we looked at the Bunya Mountains. They have a different design station to what we're going to be using, and some of the areas we access really lend themselves to making people have to go through that station by wing fencing or by vegetation. What we've done at the Tibrogargan, just as an experiment so far as with our temporary stations, we've put 2, but we haven't made them so people have to go through. These stations are not designed like the other New Zealand stations where you can actually funnel people through because they can walk on, step off to the side and walk forward. We put up cameras to monitor what usage those temporary stations are getting at Tibrogargan, and there's only about 50%. So we're aware of that, and we're going to have to think up some better strategies of getting people to use them, not only on their way in, but also on their way out.
Hi, thank you for your talk, and thank you everyone today. I was thinking about mountain biking, and I was thinking about all those e-bikes and motorbikes, and I was also thinking about the work they're doing down Stigo and Way, putting those pipes in from the automatic dam and all the trucks and all that stuff, and maybe the railway line. You know what? It's obviously a bigger issue than just the national parks. They're moving soil everywhere around the coast, and how can we spread the word to everyone and to all those other groups?
Yeah, that's a good point. We haven't even started thinking about the mountain bikes yet, and horse riding and other vectors. I see that Green Card program being a very good program, both with councils here and contractors, etc., to be aware, because that's the only way, to be effective is everybody's be involved. But a good point.
I think Mia's comment about lack of awareness is a vector.
Yeah.
Hi, Justin from Sunshine Coast Environment Council. It leads on in terms of access. Obviously, there was mentioned about the sheer numbers of people that are visiting and this expectation about being able to go anywhere, anytime, and behave in any way in terms of coming on to not just national parks but conservation areas as well. So has there been any targeted engagement with like the outdoor recreation and some of these groups that the wanting to climb as many peaks in one day and that sort of thing, which is quite objectionable on so many levels. But is there any direct targeting of some of those other groups?
Yeah, still very early days, Narelle. We are working with other climbing groups like ACAC, which is the Australian Climbing Association of Queensland, about the broader use of the peaks and what you call a green use of peaks and not bolting, etc. in our peaks. But we definitely have to, as I say, we did put out a bit of information to take a hike, as private groups that promote, big groups of people going up, but there's still a lot of work to do in that space.
Yes, yeah, helpful with that.
Thank you. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, Chris, our local landholder. Has any research been done into spread of phytophthora by animals, whether they be dogs or native animals or what?
Chris, I'll have to take that on notice. I'm sure the DPI and the DAF would have that research. They would have been doing, as I said, they did a lot of research years ago. They're still doing research. They're working with a lot of research, as mentioned before, is going into the ag sector, agricultural sector. So I'm sure they'll have those answers, but I don't have that. Thanks. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Lunch.
Okay. Thank you very much. Can everyone please give Justin a
Thank you.